Virgo. Anna here, and welcome back to Virgo. I'll be honest with you. When this came through today, I sat with it for a long time before I started because um, because the energy of it is so unambiguous and so large that I wanted to make sure I gave it the weight it actually carries. What I have for you today is not subtle. It is not hedged. It is not the careful, contingent, maybe if the conditions align kind of reading. It is something arriving for you that has the specific quality of the thing you have been building toward without always knowing you were building toward it. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, subscribe, because this is the kind of reading that Virgo exists for. Okay, let's go. Virgo, the mind does not blow from pain. It blows from the specific, unprepared encounter with something that exceeds the current framework for understanding that arrives in a form the existing categories cannot contain, that requires not just the updating of information, but the restructuring of the frame that holds the information. The experience of the mind being blown is the experience of a frame that was adequate suddenly being revealed as insufficient, not because it was wrong, but because what has arrived is larger than what the frame was built to hold. You need a bigger frame. The old one has been exceeded. Something is about to exceed your frame, not in the disorienting, destabilizing, groundlessness producing way of a frame being broken by something unwelcome, in the specific, electric, everything I thought I understood about what was possible quality of a frame being exceeded by something so good, so large, so precisely corresponding to what the deepest part of you has been oriented toward, that the mind cannot immediately absorb it and the body registers it first, and the first experience is not thought but sensation. The specific sensation of something arriving that is bigger than what was expected and better than what was modeled and real in a way that the careful, protected, I'll believe it when I see enough evidence part of you has not yet had the chance to intercept. The interception fails. The thing arrives anyway, all of it, at full size, directly into the part of you that feels before it thinks. And the feeling produces the specific, unmistakable, nobody forgets, this even years later, quality of a moment when happiness was not pursued or managed or carefully constructed from favorable conditions, but simply arrived, fully formed, too large for the frame, blowing the mind by being too good to be immediately believed and too real to be denied. Happiness is not what most people think it is. This is not a philosophical digression. It is the center of what this reading is about, because understanding what is actually approaching requires understanding what happiness actually is, as opposed to what the culture has packaged and sold under that name. The packaged version is the peak experience, the event that produces a specific elevated emotional state and then subsides, leaving the person in the ordinary state, now in possession of a memory of the elevated one. The peak experience is real. It is also not happiness in the deep sense, it is pleasure, which is a different and shorter phenomenon. Happiness in the deep sense is a baseline shift. Whew. Not an elevation above the baseline, the actual structural raising of the baseline itself of what ordinary Tuesday feels like, of what waking up without any particular agenda produces in the body, of what the ambient quality of daily experience is in the absence of specific stimulus. The difference between a person whose baseline is happiness and a person whose baseline is not happiness is not a difference in the number or frequency of peak experiences. It is the difference in what being alive feels like on the days when nothing in particular is happening. What is approaching will shift the baseline, not in one event, not from one source, but through the specific, converging, reinforcing accumulation of several things arriving in the same general period, each one shifting the baseline slightly, each shift creating the conditions for the next shift, until the cumulative effect has moved the floor of daily experience from where it has been to somewhere measurably, sustainably, impossible to mistake for a temporary peak higher. The floor is rising. What will blow your mind, specifically, not the abstract promise of good things, the specific, identifiable, already in motion things that are converging toward a single stretch of time in your life and that are individually, each significant and collectively arriving together, constitute the kind of correspondence between what you are and what surrounds you that produces the baseline shift. The first is a person, or the development of something with a person, an arrival, a return, a revelation, a change in the nature of what exists between you and someone who has been present in your field. Whatever specific form the person dimension takes, it carries a quality that is going to be disorienting in its goodness. The specific, I did not think this was actually possible quality of being fully, correctly, at the right depth received by someone, of having the version of yourself that you are when no one is watching be exactly the version that this person finds irreplaceable, of discovering that what you assumed was too much or too complicated or too specific to find its perfect correspondence has found its perfect correspondence. The correspondence is the mind-blowing part. Not the person per se, though. The person is extraordinary. But the specific shock of being correctly received after a period in which the correct reception felt unlikely, of finding that what you are corresponds to what someone is looking for, not in the surface match way of shared preferences and compatible schedules, but in the deep architecture way of two people whose interior structures fit together in a way that makes both structures more stable than either was alone. You are about to experience that fit. The second source of the baseline shift is material. Something in the conditions of your life is changing, has been changing, is in the process of producing a result that will become visible in this period. Not a windfall in the sudden arrived from nowhere sense. The result of things that have been developing, seeds planted in seasons you may no longer be fully tracking, investments made in directions that had not yet paid, work done in the dark without confirmation that the dark was producing anything. The dark was producing something. The something is arriving at the surface now in the form of changed conditions, of an arrangement that works better than the previous arrangement, of a resource that is now available that was not previously available, of the specific practical This changes what is possible from here, quality of a material situation that has crossed from constraint into something closer to ease. Not ease in the sense of nothing being required, but ease in the sense of the requirement not consuming everything, of there being something left over. Space, time, the specific luxury of not having to direct the full force of your attention toward the management of inadequate conditions. Something left over. That is the material mind blow. The discovery that there is something left over, that the container is not perpetually exactly full, that there is room, that the life has begun to have room. The third source is the most interior and, in some ways, the most significant. You are going to surprise yourself, not in the generic, inspirational poster way of discovering hidden reserves of strength. In the specific, concrete, this is what I am actually capable of way of encountering something about yourself that your previous experience had not yet given you the conditions to discover. The specific capability or quality or capacity that the previous period constrained as it was, demanding as it was, organized as it was around survival and management rather than around full expression, could not access, that was present, always present, but never called for in the specific form in which it is about to be called for. What is coming is going to call for the best version, is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than, and the best version is going to show up not because you willed it, because the conditions for it are, for the first time in this period, actually present. Because the person and the material shift and the interior surprise are all creating simultaneously the conditions under which the thing you are actually capable of can simply emerge without force, without the specific effortful quality of someone pushing a capability that is not yet ready, naturally, in the way that things emerge when the conditions are right and the capability was always there. You are going to discover something about yourself. And it is going to be better than you thought. The mind-blown moment, it will not announce itself. This is the thing about the experiences that actually blow the mind, the ones that make the phrase mean something, rather than being the hyperbole it has become. They do not come wrapped in fanfare. They do not arrive with a cinematic score that signals to the viewer that the important moment is happening. They arrive in ordinary containers, in conversations that seem, at their start, like ordinary conversations, in moments that could, if you were paying the wrong kind of attention, be missed, in the specific, unremarkable from the outside form of something that is entirely remarkable from the inside. The inside of it is where the mind-blowing occurs. In the half second when something lands and the body registers it before the mind has processed it, in the specific precognitive, everything is suddenly different quality of a moment in which a piece of information about your life reaches the place where information about your life actually lives, not in the analytical mind, but in the part of you that knows what things mean before the analytical mind has had a chance to translate the knowing into language. That part is going to know when it happens, when the person does the specific thing that no one else has done. when the material shift becomes visible in a form you can touch. When you encounter yourself in a new situation and discover, with the specific surprise of finding something you did not know you had lost, that you are capable of more than you knew, that part will know immediately. Will produce the specific body level response, the thing in the chest, the changed quality of breath, the sudden overwhelming sense of something that might be relief or might be joy or might be both. That is the internal experience of a mind being blown by something too good to have been accurately predicted. Trust what the body knows. So happy. The title promises this, and the promise deserves to be examined, not to diminish it, but to give it its accurate shape. So happy is not the happiness of the peak experience, the elevated state that subsides back to baseline when the stimulus that produced it is no longer present. So happy is the baseline shift. The discovery that the floor of daily experience is different from what it was, that what ordinary feels like has changed. You will know it is the baseline shift rather than the peak when you notice it on a Tuesday. Not on the day of the extraordinary event, on the day after, and the day after that, when the extraordinary has become the ordinary, when what was once the thing you hoped for has become the thing you live in, when the specific quality of everyday life has a different ambient temperature than it had in the period that preceded this, warmer, more spacious, more characterized by the specific, unremarkable, entirely sustainable quality of someone who is living rather than managing. That is the so happy of the title. Not the excitement of the new, the settlement of the real, the specific, deeply satisfying. Nobody talks about this because it is too ordinary quality of waking up in a life that is yours in the full sense that corresponds to what you are, that does not require constant adjustment to be habitable, that feels less like a project you are managing and more like a place you actually live. You are going to live there, not just visit, live, in the sustained daily, this is just what my life is now, way of someone who has crossed from the period of constrained conditions into the period of corresponding ones. The fire and the flash. The title puts both of these in fire and flash, the hot sustained burn and the sudden brilliant illumination, and both are accurate to what is approaching. The flash is the mind-blown moment. The specific, sudden, too large for the existing frame arrival of something that exceeds the model. The fire is what follows. The sustained, self-fueling, does not require constant maintenance burn of something that has found its source material and is simply burning cleanly at the right temperature without the frantic resource-consuming quality of something that is burning through what it doesn't have. The flash is close. Whew. It may have already begun in the first tentative, almost deniable edges of the things that are converging. In the specific quality of recent days that has been slightly different from the days before them, without your being able to locate precisely what is different, in the sense, if you have been paying the specific kind of attention that registers these things, that the floor has already begun to move. And the fire, the sustained, settled, self-fueling fire of a baseline that has shifted. That is what the flash ignites. That is what the mind blown moment is the beginning of. Not a peak that subsides, a new sustained state, a new ordinary that is better than the old ordinary by a margin that the old ordinary could not have modeled because the frame was not large enough to contain the model. The frame is expanding right now to hold what is arriving. Virgo, you are going to be so happy. Not in the eventual someday when everything finally aligns way. In the specific datable, this is the period way of something that is already in motion and is arriving in the form of three converging sources: the person, the material shift, the interior discovery, each one contributing to the baseline shift that produces the sustainable, real, ordinary Tuesday quality of a life that has crossed into correspondence. The mind blown moment is the entry point. When it arrives in whatever ordinary container it chooses, through whatever unremarkable door it opens, trust what the body knows before the mind has processed it. Trust the thing in the chest. Trust the changed quality of breath. Trust the specific precognitive, this is real recognition that arrives in the half second before the protective machinery can intercept it and begin its work of making what is happening seem smaller than it is. It is not smaller than it is. It is exactly as large as it feels in the half second before the interception. The frame that is being blown was too small. The model that could not predict this was calibrated to conditions that are no longer current. What is arriving is not too good to be true. It is simply too good for the old frame. Build a bigger frame. The biggest one you can imagine, and then build it slightly larger than that, because what is coming is going to fill it all the way to the edges, and it is going to feel like home.